Hey you guys, it's Sam here again with Harvey Cat Homestead. I've been telling you guys I'm gonna, do a video about my tomatoes, and I haven't done it yet, but they're starting to ripen. So I am out here to kind of explain what I have going on, what varieties I have planted, what the situation is with this bed, because I know it's unique. Most people don't have this weird round black plastic bed with this crazy wooden trellis over top of it. So I'm gonna just go ahead and get right into it. Everybody loves a tomato, right? Here in the South, I feel like it's always a competition to see who can get the biggest tomato the fastest, or maybe it's not the biggest the fastest, maybe it's just as quick as you possibly can, and then later in the year maybe it's the largest one or the one with the best flavor. Everybody is crazy about a tomato sandwich. I don't care if you like mayonnaise on it or not, but BLTs are killer. And man, if you've ever had basil, just a fresh basil leaf on a BLT, that's a whole other level. It's like caprese salad or something plus BLT. We just get crazy over here. Anyway, yeah, there's tons and tons of varieties out there. You'll notice most of what I have is actually quite similar in terms of how it grows, how each of these plants grow. So you're going to have either a determinate or an indeterminate variety. A lot of heirloom varieties, which just means they come true to seed. So when I say heirloom, most of what I grow is heirloom, and that is pretty much entirely because I don't like buying seed. If I can produce my own seed, I would rather do that than go spend money and have to just continue the cycle. You're not actually saving a lot of money if you're having to buy new stuff every single year. So I do what I can in terms of simplifying that. Now, I will say they can cross-pollinate if you plant them really close, like I have these. There are ways around that. And I can't remember if I've shown you that or not. I think I might have done a short about it, or I might have just posted on Facebook. Anyway, there are these little, I'm looking because I think I might actually have one. Yeah. So there are these bags. This one's not the right size for a tomato. I learned that the hard way. It's okay for the actual seed, or not the seed. It's okay. It's an okay size for the flower, but it is not an okay size for the fruit. And you can kind of tell. I mean, that's pretty small. Now, if I was just wanting to protect it for pollination, this works fine, but you would need to remove it pretty quickly after that fruit sets. Yeah, that's these guys. And I think I just got these on Amazon. And you can do this for any plant that you want to pollinate. If you're like with squash and stuff, you can really easily like hand pollinate, come out with like a little brush and protect it and prevent it from anything else. I mean, it's just a little drawstring, so protect it like that. Anyway, that's not tomatoes. We'll talk about tomatoes now. So, heirlooms, that's what I was talking about. They come true to seed, generally speaking. Whereas with a hybrid, a lot of hybrids, you don't really know what, if that seed produces a plant in the first place, it may not be a true, it's pretty much guaranteed you're not going to get the same plant that you started with, just because it's not a stabilized seed. There are other pros that come along with a hybrid seed, like they're typically hardier in terms of dealing with pests and diseases and whatnot, and the flavor is pretty good. And I don't think the flavor's as good as an heirloom, but to each his own. I understand why people grow them. They're easier to grow. You can see with some of mine, I've already got some blight and things like that going on, and it's not, I mean, this is like, tomorrow is July 1st. So there's already problems happening, which that's pretty common. I'll talk at the end of this video about common issues and for tomatoes overall. So most of what I have are heirloom. Actually, all of what I have are heirloom. all of what I have are canning tomatoes. They're good for, I tried to plant a good, each of these, I did my research. I'm that kind of person. Like, I want to make sure that the variety that I'm planting is going to give me what I'm looking for in a fruit. So that's probably one of the best garden tips that I've ever heard is, hey, don't plant something that you're not planning on eating, especially if it's squash, because the squash will carry you away. You will have so much squash that you won't know what to do with it. And if you don't like to eat it, that's a big waste of time and energy. So that being said, I don't have any cherry tomatoes in this garden. I have historically planted some, like maybe 1 or 2 plants each year. This year, they kept sitting on my counter and then I just wasn't really doing anything with them. Like, I'd snack on a few, but cherry tomatoes produce like crazy and I don't like allowing things to go to waste. So I would I would end up canning some, but like, what are you going to do with canned cherry tomatoes? I think that I ended up adding them to chili. That was about it. And that's okay, but I don't eat that much chili. So it just wasn't for me. And that's fine. That's one of my favorite things about gardening is you can make it whatever you want it to be. As long as you don't mind being out here in the heat, dealing with bugs and all that fun stuff, you can do so much and get so creative with it. And it brings me so much joy. I'm so grateful for it. All right. That's a general overview. So I can't remember if I said this or not. All of the heirlooms that I have growing are indeterminate varieties, which means they don't really stop growing. They will just, as long as they have the resources that they need to continue to grow, they're just going to grow and grow and grow and grow and never stop. So that is compared to something that's pretty common with hybrids is they stop at a certain point. Like, they'll get maybe 5 feet tall and then just be done, which that's great if you have limited space. There are even varieties that are dwarf varieties that are really good for people that are living with limited outdoor space. I've seen people do those in green stalk planters and all kinds of really space-saving tight stuff, which is great. Like, again, it's so cool that there are so many options out there. But anyway, that being said, let me show you the options that I decided to go with. Okay, what you're looking at right here is a Dr. Wychee tomato. This is like a deep orange colored. This is my first year growing this tomato. It's not quite ready. The top of it is still green. I realize you guys probably can't see any of that. There's another one right here that is also still green. This one actually has a bit of sun scald on it. I'm not sure how well you can see that grayish tone right there on the top of that fruit, but that is not ideal. But anyway, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Wychee. Dr. Wychee, Dr. Wychee is a dentist, and he had a tomato breeding program. He was not only a dentist, he was also a co-owner of a circus. So he had elephant poop. He had a bunch of elephant poop, and that was what he fertilized his plants with in terms of his breeding program. So he is the one who actually curated the breeding of these tomatoes in like the 1930s. I'm not going to tell you that each individual one of these is indeterminate. It's obvious. I just told you all of them are indeterminate. So this one's like an 80-day to maturity, so it takes a good while. All of these honestly take a pretty good long while, but that is our Dr. Wychee. And I've got basil growing all along here. This is blue spice basil. People really love to plant basil alongside tomatoes. They say it's a really good companion plant, and I will say it is an excellent companion plant, but I wouldn't use your like sweet basil, your Genovese style basil. I would go with something like this blue spice basil or like a holy basil, Tulsi, something that is going to flower. You could even do a Thai basil. The flowers on these draw in so many pollinators. Like, the bees absolutely love it. And they have the same kind of needs as the tomatoes do. And so you just get way more bang for your buck. And yeah, the oils in the basil are supposed to be a deterrent for things like buggy pests like tomato hornworms. I will say, I've never seen a tomato hornworm in this bed as long as I have had this blue spice basil planted alongside it. Anyway, that's a lot of companion planting. I don't necessarily care for, like, it's not really that big of a deal to me in most situations, but in this situation, I think it's just perfect. So, okay, we can move on to our next tomato. All right, so what we have down here is a Wood's Famous Brimmer. This plant is supposed to produce tons and tons and tons of fruit, and there's a fair bit on this one guy down here. So I'm trying to turn him so that you can see while me not doing a ton of damage. I think I am going to go ahead and pull this one so you can get a closer look at it. It's a nice round little guy. He's still got a little bit of, I can't tell if that's green shoulders or if that's a bit of sun scald. I mean, we have had temperatures in the, high 90s here in the past week. But anyway, these guys, on average, you can get like 1 pound fruits. That guy's probably a little bit less than 1 pound, but they're nice. They're pinkish red colored fruits. This is another one this is probably the shortest one that I have. It's like 75-ish days to maturity. And when I say days to maturity, what I mean there is the plant, it is not from when that seed germinates. It is from when you put this plant out here in your garden. So with tomatoes, ideally you start them, like 12 weeks early if you really want to get a good jump on things. These I had to restart all of mine. I actually initially did start them in January, and then as you do, you kind of lose some, I had some problems, but anyway, so that's days to maturity. It is the days from, like, you count the day you plant it in the garden, and then 75 days later is when you can expect to start getting fruit. And tomatoes are frustrating because tomatoes do this thing where they're green and they're beautiful and they're big, and then they stay green for what feels like forever. And if you're a new gardener especially, it is like torture just waiting for them to be ready. And man, it just, when they do finally start blushing like this, it is the most exciting thing ever. So I will tell you, in terms of me picking this one, it probably was just a little bit early, but with heirloom tomatoes, you can pick them as soon as you start seeing color. So honestly, any of these out here that are not just straight green, I could pick and bring in the house. And so they'll finish ripening on the counter. But what I will say about that is you're not going to get the most intense flavor as you would if you came out here and harvested them when they were bright red or orange or yellow or whatever color you've decided to grow in the heat of the day. Like, the more intense that heat, the better the flavor in that tomato is going to be, which is why I wouldn't recommend harvesting. Like, if you're growing Roma tomatoes, Romas don't really have a ton of flavor. So unless you are really letting them get ripe on the vine, I don't think you're going to get the best tasting product out of that tomato. But I want to show you something really quick on this. So this guy right here, this is where it had split. Splitting is a very, very common problem with tomatoes, and that is due to variations in watering. And that'll happen if you go for too long without watering and then you give them a ton of water. They just don't really know what to do with it, and so everything fills up to the point where it bursts. It literally cellularly bursts in different spaces. Now, obviously, it can heal over. It forms that little callus. But if I was eating this fresh, I wouldn't want to eat that. The texture of it, I mean, it's kind of like it's scabbed over. The flavor's not as good. Well, I mean, it really can damage the flavor of the tomato. And it can cause, I mean, it can ruin your crop. But in general, the best way to avoid that would be watering early in the morning every 2 days. So just having a consistent schedule and not watering when it's too crazy hot and not letting them get dried out. So anyway, that's our Woods famous Brimmer tomato. We'll move on to our next variety now. Okay, so this, my friends, is a new favorite of mine. This stink bug, get out of here. This is a pineapple tomato. I'm going to show you this. So this is actually quite similar to what we just looked at in the Dr. Wychees. It's a nice deep yellow tomato. It's not named pineapple because of its flavor. It's actually named pineapple because of this ribbing, this texture along the outside of the plant, of like the over the top of the fruit. It's kind of a unique texture. It's, you know, it's bumpy. And I can tell that a worm got into that, and I think it didn't live, but it did get in there. Anyway, here's another problem with these guys. This is due to the shape of the tomato. Some call this cat facing. This isn't exactly cat facing. I don't think this was a fasciated blossom. This is just a strangeness in terms of the shape of this specific variety. That's something that you get a lot with heirlooms. And you can see I've got a fair bit of blight as well here. This is just par for the course for growing tomatoes in the South, especially when it starts getting hot and we get tons of rain. But anyway, cat facing is what happens when you have multiple blossoms together that are fused, that bloom at the same time. And I'm looking around here and I'm actually not seeing any new blossoms. Let me just break this off and show you what happens whenever it's too hot for a tomato. So this right here, let's see if you can see it. Okay, there we go. This little guy, this was a flower. And what happens when it's 97 degrees out here is they say, I know I cannot set fruit because I am concerned that I may not survive. So all of their flowers shrivel up. That is why people get kind of this boon of like just missing fruit in the middle of summer, which is, you know, it's a doggone shame. I will tell you, I have just ripped tomatoes out of the ground because you get this one big flush of fruit and then you don't get anything else after that until it gets cooler. So I will tell you, if you can be a little more patient, you will get more fruit. But anyway, pineapple tomatoes. They're like on average around 2 pounds. Obviously, they're weird shape. They're really sweet. That's why I like them, is their sweetness. They're not too terribly acidic. So they're great for both slicing and for canning, as all of these tomatoes out here are. But they're such a unique shape. So I decided to try the Dr. Wychees in order to see if it would be better than this. And I've eaten one so far, and the flavor's okay. Like, I don't know that I would say I would want to replace this tomato yet, but anyway, I do really, really like a pineapple tomato. This was my new favorite that I grew for the first time last year. That would be in 2024. Okay, I think that's about it in terms of my pineapple. I guess I should mention, I told you I saw that worm down in there. They can actually compartmentalize that damage, and you can still harvest the fruit if you catch them early enough. If you don't, I will tell you that fruit will not be worth eating and it will make you nauseous. So if you are battling armyworms, I feel your pain. But that is the difference between an armyworm that's going to actually burrow down into the fruit and a tomato hornworm, which a lot of people have problems with that just eat the foliage, which that's not a good thing either. But, you know, there's something about getting excited about eating a tomato and then realizing there's a giant worm in it the size of your pinky that just kind of makes you feel a little sick. Anyway, I really hope you're not having to deal with that. We're going to move on to our next variety. All right, so this variety here, this is a Paul Robeson. This is an heirloom that came out of Russia, which is why it's named Paul Robeson. So I actually had no idea who Paul Robeson was until I started researching this tomato. So he, in the 30s, he was an actor and a civil rights activist, and he had pro-Soviet views, which is why the Russian individuals who were breeding this tomato decided to name this plant after him. So this, as far as the fruit on this thing, you get like 6 to 12 ounces, which I realize is kind of a big range, but they're like a brick red is what I've heard it called. They do have like a deeper color to them. So they do have a little bit of anthocyanin, which is an antioxidant, which is like where that purple color comes from in every fruit, actually. It is all from anthocyanins. So that is going to be our Paul Robeson. It's supposed to have a really good balance of acidity and sweetness. This is my first year growing this, so I actually don't know exactly what to expect. I can tell you that the plants have not done just amazing. They're okay, but I'm not like especially impressed yet. Now, I will tell you, I am more impressed with them than I am something that I'm growing right next to it, which has only set about 2 fruit, and that would be my carbon tomato. Please don't mind my nasturtium. This is a different plant. This is a nice little edible. Like the flowers and the leaves on this are edible. The rabbits love it. So it's just a fun thing to grow. So back in here are my own, there's green, those 2 little guys right there. Those are my only 2 carbon tomatoes so far this year. I'm slightly concerned that I'm just not really going to get any carbon tomatoes, which makes me very sad because they are a deep purple. They're kind of similar to a Cherokee purple. They take even longer. They're like 90 days to determine it, or to 90 days to maturity. They are an indeterminate plant, but you wouldn't know that looking at them because they're quite small. I realize this is kind of a jungle and it's a little bit difficult to even know exactly what I'm talking about here, but carbon is a very, very, very old variety. We're not even sure how old it is. Most of these other ones are from like the 30s, but carbon, we think it's maybe from Mexico or like South America somewhere, and it's like settlers just kind of spread it throughout the world. But anyway, the skin on it's just a little bit thinner, so you can have a little bit of extra splitting with it a little sooner. But the flavor is phenomenal. It's one of my absolute favorites to use in any kind of salsa or sauce or anything like that. So it makes me really sad that it's not doing so great. And I know a lot of it has to do with the heat. And I will show you, I'm gonna pick you up. I feel bad moving this camera because I feel like I don't want to make you dizzy. Anyway, we do have these 2 or 3 little blooms here. So they've recovered at least a little bit. Hopefully we don't, look, I know it's going to get crazy hot again. I've lived in North Carolina for the majority of my life. You see this here? I know. This is frizzy. This is humidity. I know it's going to get hot and stay hot. But I'm really hoping that I can at least get a little bit of fruit set before things go crazy like they just were last weekend. All right. Let's sit you down over here and we will talk a little bit about common diseases and whatnot, more so than what I already have. So I know you guys have noticed right off this trellis. Let me see if, yeah. So up through each of those little cross tie things, there's a hole, and I have a string running up and over and down. When you're doing the string method, all you really need are these little clips, and I keep this guy filled with them out here because especially at the beginning of the season when they're growing like crazy, you got to come out here. So what you do is you put that little lip right here, those little teeth, you put that around the string, and you kind of tuck your stem into the big part here, and you just clasp it, and you can reuse them over and over again. They work great. So these little guys, I mean, it's probably not great that I have them sitting out here in the sun. They're probably going to decay a little quicker sitting here like that, but I'm not terribly worried about it. But they, like, you buy a pack of like 300 of them for $10 on Amazon, maybe even cheaper than that. It's been a while since I've even looked, but like I said, they last a long time, and you can buy a big reel of that string. There is a specific kind of string you want to get, because with it being out here in the sun, it is going to decay, you know, or rot away. Like I wouldn't recommend using something like jute twine for this, but so whenever you're actually creating this system, you don't have to tie it to the ground. All you have to do is make sure that it's clipped to the base of the plant. It's not as if the wind is going to grab it and like rip your plant out of the ground. If that has happened to you, I am sorry. I can't imagine it happening in central North Carolina. We don't have really bad windstorms here typically. We'll have a little bit of, you know, thunderstorms and stuff, but not anything like that. Because mostly with the string, there's not really anything the wind can catch onto, you know, it's just this thin little thread. So this, I've tried doing cattle panel trellises. I've tried doing tomato stakes. I've tried doing like meatier cages. This is my absolute favorite. I will tell you, I don't plan on using this exact method next year. And it's because I have too many plants in one place and I want more plants. So I'm actually going to build, I'll show you guys this entire process, but I'm going to build a totally different kind of bed with a built-in structure that I'm very excited about. I'm dreaming about it right now. I don't know that it's going to happen until like winter, mostly because I'm going to have to, I'm not going to get into it. This video is going to be 2 hours long with me talking about tomatoes if I start talking about my beds too. So let's not do that. Okay, so the trellis is important. If you're not trellising your tomatoes, you're going to have a jungle. It's going to be flopping all over the place, and your tomatoes are going to end up on the ground. And what happens is, if your actual fruit is on the ground, the bugs are going to get to it before you. They're going to get dirty. They're going to get yucky. You're going to lose your harvest. So with tomatoes, you do need, they are a vine. They're a vine without tendrils. They don't have any tools to grab and hook onto things. So they need help. They need extra help. And please don't waste your money on tomato cages. Just don't do it. It's so sad. They don't do anything. They don't do enough unless you have like dwarf tomatoes. Even then, they just kind of want to trail. So anyway, tomato cages work well for certain things like other vines that are smaller, but tomatoes are big and meaty. So blossom end rot is a very, very common problem. And when I say blossom end rot, this doesn't have it, but this is our tomato that we picked earlier. This is the blossom end. So this is literally where the flower was, and it'll dry up and fall off. So what happens is it's actually a calcium deficiency, and you just get black rot starting from this end of the tomato, and it can encompass the entire thing, and you can lose a lot of fruit that way. But it's due to a calcium deficiency. So one way to help, I do bone meal in my soil over the winter. Bone meal takes a long time to break down, but if you're processing meat, if you have, like with us with our rabbits, we're making bone broth anyway, and by the time that is finished, like that bone is really brittle and you can crumble it. So if you're making any kind of food like that, please don't go and spend money on bone meal because it's very expensive and it takes a long time to break down. So our beds are full of things that it is a closed, the whole goal is a closed loop system, right? The garden feeds the rabbits feed the garden, and then us too, we're all a team here. So calcium, there are foliar calcium sprays if you are absolutely desperate, that if you have blossom end rot that you can get a hold of, that the plants uptake very quickly. Something that I noticed, I know I have good calcium in this bed, but this spring we had so much rain. We had, every single day it was just a downpour. So what happens whenever you have that much rain is the plants literally cannot take up nutrients. They can only, they're so turgid, they are so full of water that they cannot absorb the micronutrients that they need out of the soil. And that is often why you end up with early spring blossom end rot. And that's a common problem for squash as well. I have squash literally right behind you. So I keep pointing over there. Anyway, so that blossom end rot's a really common problem. Things like leaf curl, the blight that's on there. Something that you can do to help prevent that blight is actually put up shade cloth. And I posted a video the other day about removing shade cloth and replacing it in the rabbitry because I had another plan for that shade cloth. Now, granted, that's not going to work for me this year because I have to use that shade cloth in another situation with the rabbitry. But my plan was to actually drape that shade cloth over this entire trellis to help protect the tomatoes and ideally to get more fruit off of them. Because as I showed you just a moment ago, if it's too hot, their flowers just curl up and die. And that is not what we want. So I've already talked to you guys about the bug pests as well. I mentioned sun scald. This shade cloth would help with that too. I will tell you, if you're putting up any kind of structure in terms of like shade cloth or something, you don't want to completely cover it because you still need your bee friends and your other pollinators to get in there and actually share the pollen between the plants, because otherwise you're not going to get fruit set. So that's, yeah, I talked to you about cat facing too, right? You tell me, right? Yeah. Oh, lovely conversations here. I am grateful I get to chat with you because it's fun. I really enjoy doing this. I wish I could bring you along with me and we could wander around my garden and just chat. And that's one of my favorite things when my friends come over. Is like, I want them to wander in my garden with me because I want to share all of the goodness and all of the joy that it brings me, because it's just so beautiful and it's so fun. And I love like sharing things that I can, and any kind of food. If I have an opportunity to cook for somebody out of my garden, I'm so excited about it. It's one of my favorite things. So anyway, that's all I got for you about tomatoes. I'm sure I'll think of something in just a little bit that I totally forgot about, but yeah, that's what I got. So thank you for being my friend and for hanging out with me and for watching me point to things. And like, I know this is a jungle, so I know it's a little difficult to see, but I really appreciate you tuning in and listening anyway. It makes me really happy. So I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for this garden. I'm grateful for the love of Jesus, and I hope that you know that you are loved and that you have an absolutely beautiful day. My name is Sam. Thank you for hanging out with me. Goodbye, friends.